Welcome to another episode of From Grad to Growth. And on today's episode, we are tackling one of the most fundamental questions or undertakings a founder would have to do between their journey. That's the question of where do you build your startup? Are you going to go web? Are you going to go mobile? And on today's episode, once again, I'm welcomed by Angelo. And Angelo is the co-founder and CEO of Elemental. So before we get into the neat and greedy, I'd just like to give you the floor, introduce yourself, and let the people know you are again.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. As you mentioned, I'm Angelo Zanetti, CEO and co-founder of Elemental. Yeah, I've been in the web and software development business for about just under 20 years now. Our company builds web applications, mobile apps, software based here in Cape Town. And keen to get into this topic. It's quite a topic, it's a topic that rears its head quite often, and we often encounter this question quite a lot, as I think you are as well. So I think other founders have also got this sort of conundrum as to do they go web, do they go mobile, what are all the sort of considerations. So yeah, keen to share what I can.
I just want to paint a picture of this web and mobile conversation, where now currently mobile now drives nearly 60% of global web traffic. But on the other side as well, desktop still dominate the conversation with regards to conversions. So there's this kind of paradox for a founder. So how do you go about telling a founder who wants to know the fundamentals of where do I go web or do I go mobile? How do you go about telling them this is where they go? Was all they want to know is the answer to this question of where should I build my business?
No, it's a fantastic question to kind of start off, and we're kind of getting straight into it. So the truth is that there's not really a one size fits all answer, and there's no real simple way to think about it. But we often tell our founders really start to think of your users. Start with them, and what sort of solution are you solving? What solution is your app solving for them? And then from there kind of work backwards. So yeah, in broad strokes, think of it like this. A web app is obviously, well, it's not obvious. It's obvious to us, but it's generally faster and more cost effective to develop. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit later, why that may be. And especially for early validation and MVPs, a lot of founders, they're always talking about MVP. I want to get to market quickly. I want to launch. I want to test product market fit. So getting an MVP up and running and getting early validation is key. So web apps, they work across many devices immediately. Search engines can find web apps, and then you don't sort of have to have this whole hurdle of people downloading and installing something on their phone, which is the case of a mobile app. So for a mobile app, it makes, when you need features that are specific to the phone. So think of push notifications, offline access, integrations like with the camera, location-based tracking or hardware sensors. So those kinds of apps that need those functions and features, fitness apps, then it makes sense to go more the mobile app route. So yeah, basically there's a lot to consider, and we'll get into it a bit more. But a lot of people just say, "I want just build an app," and we hear this all the time. I want an app. Please build me an app. And you don't really want to just build an app because of the costs, and then you can achieve a lot of things in web. Yeah. And much quicker, much cheaper. But again, we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. So, yeah.
And you touched on this when you first started with regards to having push notifications on the app. And that gives you that direct customer engagement. So how can you utilize push notifications wisely to keep your customers engaged? And how would you do the opposite on a web browser where you don't have that ability to send out push notifications to your customers?
Yeah, so one of the benefits of a mobile app are push notifications. So just to clarify, web apps also have push notifications, but they're not as effective. And then often they are disabled by the device. So you kind of have to manually turn them on, which kind of makes it, unusable, right? So I would say when you're using push notifications to communicate to your user base, I would say use it sparingly. right? Don't bombard people. Always add value to the user rather than annoy them. So I think that using push notifications to add value in terms of like reminding users of something that they might not have forgotten or something that they may miss out on, that they'd be like, wow, thanks, I actually forgot about this special, or there's this event, or there's this thing that I need to be doing. I think that's where it's again adding value. But if you're kind of spamming them about new updates or, marketing messages that aren't really relevant and are actually quite annoying, then you're actually going to like upset your user base. So again, try and, look at that and even maybe measure previous kind of push notifications and see sort of what is the success rate. You can use surveys to kind of understand what sort of level of notifications they want to receive, or you can even build in functionality to ask them what types of notifications do they want to get. Is it just critical notifications, or is it kind of marketing, critical notifications, reminders? So that's on the mobile app side. On the web-based side, I would say that you could do the same with email. You could even do the same with text messages or SMSs. You could even do the same with WhatsApp API integration. So most people have got WhatsApp, and we're doing quite a lot of WhatsApp API integrations where you're getting links to your mobile app, to your WhatsApp app on your phone. And that's kind of allowing you to communicate with users on that channel. Again, you need to kind of be really careful of which channels you're using, but push notifications are really quite powerful if they're used in the right way.
How do I know as a founder or as someone who has an idea that my idea is a slam dunk for web, or is it a slam dunk to being on a mobile? What do I need to look out for?
I would again say that web is definitely cheaper. It's quicker to build and it's quicker to deploy. And everyone's got a web browser on their phone, right? In fact, you've got a web browser on your laptop and on your tablet and on your desktop. Whereas if you only got a mobile app version, it's only going to be in your smartphone, right? So that's the one thing: cost, time to market, and then accessibility. But again, it's a slam dunk for mobile app only if your users are only going to be engaging with you on a mobile app. And if you've got a web-based app, they're not interested in using that. So the market sort of dictates that you need a mobile app. And then if your mobile app needs access to certain device features, as we spoke about earlier, it could be like health data or location-based tracking and things like that. And if your app is kind of reliant on that, then, that's kind of a telltale sign that you need to kind of go mobile, and that's it.
Yeah. And the other thing is both strategies kind of offer you downside. I think nothing is future proof. What are some of the downsides of going mobile only, and what are some of the downsides of going web only?
Look, the downside. Okay, let's start with the downside on web apps first. So the downside is that you don't have this icon on your home screen, as we spoke about. So it's a little bit more complicated to access a website. You need to get the user to do a bit of work, typing in the address. The other downside is limited or almost non-existent push notifications, which we just touched on as well, which is really powerful for engaging the users. And then, phone specific features, as we spoke about, the health data, Bluetooth, location-based tracking. So if your app or your product or your solution relies heavily on those kinds of things, then, you're actually not going to get away with a sort of a web-based application. It's a core feature. The downsides of mobile, that it's more complicated to build, to develop, therefore it costs more. And maybe I can just touch on that as well. So as a web developer, when you're building a website or web application, typically you're writing code, you're updating it, and then you want to test it on a browser. So, you could deploy it to a web server, and that takes maybe a few seconds, maybe a minute or two. You refresh your browser, and then you've got access to like the latest changes that you've made. So it's quite a fairly quick process. Whereas if you're building a mobile app, processes that you're going to be doing some development or you're fixing some features, what you actually have to do is you have to build or compile the app, right? Which takes a minute to a few minutes, depending on how complex the web app is, the power of the PC. Then you've still got to deploy that compiled version of an app to to a simulation device or to a actual device. And then you've got to go and then actually use that device or simulation device and then go and navigate and find out the section that you've changed or updated and then go and test it. So the time needed for doing that is like way more than when you're building a web. That just means that your project's going to take longer. It's going to cost more. And obviously for a lot of founders, maybe they've raised some money or they've got some of their own capital and they're basically kind of watching their money and their spend because they want to get to market quickly, as cheaply as possible and as soon as possible. So mobile apps kind of make it a bit more, expensive for them. It takes them longer and it kind of doesn't have this real appeal.
Yeah.
Then the other thing is the downside to mobile apps is, say, for example, I'm building a web app for finding property, right? Let's say student accommodation. And now, I've got my website, it's live, and I can basically deploy my work to this website, and it takes maybe a few minutes or a few hours to test, and then it's kind of live. It's there. No one has to go and update or install their browser. It's kind of like as you access the web browser, the website, the latest version is literally the version that you see. Whereas with mobile apps, people need to kind of update their app from time to time. But the one key thing is that mobile apps need to be deployed to users through the app stores. So you get the iOS store, which is for Apple, and then you get the Android store, the Google Play store. And essentially, to get your app on these stores is quite a long process. So you need to take a lot of screenshots. You need to describe your app. You need to explain certain functionality, and you need to kind of give them a lot of information. And then this goes through an approval process, which can basically take days to weeks. And essentially they will get all this information you submitted and they can reject your app. And then you've got to go and work on it, change certain things, or maybe provide them with more information, submit it again, which takes a bit of time as well. And they're going to take a bit of time to review it. And then eventually you kind of get to a point where they approve your app. So compare that to a web-based browser where I can deploy stuff and see it sort of almost instantly. Now, anything that I need to update or launch on my app, I need to go through a verification process, which takes time in itself. And also the preparation to submit everything to these app stores takes time. So those are downsides. And then there's a final downside on a mobile app side where, say, for example, I want to have a subscription-based platform. It's an educational platform for the markets, right? And then people are going to pay me $10 a month to subscribe to that. So they can subscribe and pay, and then every month the billing comes off, and then I'm going to get, that money. But what happens is on mobile apps is the app stores have this thing they call it sort of like a tax. And
on whatever purchase.
Exactly. So they basically call it a platform tax. So they may take 15 to 30% of your kind of revenue from your subscribers. So like that's a big margin already that's been taken. And on web, like there is no such thing as that. So that's sort of another downside as well.
Yeah. So if we are looking at the risk with regards to building native only, and there's a risk from building on web as well, it's natural for founders to kind of look for a different path. So this brings up to the often confusing world of hybrid apps and progressive web apps. So can you kind of break this down for the listeners?
So you obviously get web apps, which are kind of a fancy term for like a website. So this is a website with a lot of functionality. A progressive web app is kind of similar to that, where it's got loads of functionality. It almost looks and works like an app, but it's built in web technology. It's responsive, meaning that it works across different browsers. So I can access it, as you said, on my desktop, on my laptop, on my mobile phone, but it's all accessible through a web browser. And it's not available through an app store, right? Then you get hybrid mobile apps. So, the hybrid mobile apps are basically mobile apps that are built using a combination of web technology and mobile application technology. How it works is you build the app once, and then that app is compiled, and it's available for both Apple and Android stores, right? So, you write it once, and you might have like slight differences in code. Maybe there's a few little things that you need to do for one operating system or another. And then hybrid mobile apps have got access to a lot of the phone's features, but they don't have access to everything. So, but it's got access to, quite a lot of features. And they are compiled, they're uploaded to the App Store, they need to be verified as I described in the previous answer, and then essentially users download them and use them, and they've got no idea that it's a hybrid app, right? And then the fourth type is actually called native apps. So for Apple and for Android, you can write applications specifically for those devices, and you've got access to the sort of lowest level phone features. But the thing is, you've got to write an application specific to each device, and that's called native. And these are the fastest performing applications. But again, you're kind of writing the application twice, once for each operating system. And then again, how users access them is again through the App Store, and the verification process applies. And the end users, none the wiser. They won't really be able to tell the difference between a hybrid app and a native app.
Yeah. And with regards to that, what are some of the long-term with regards to maintaining this product? We've talked about on the cost of it all. So now we've built this apps. How do we go about maintaining it? What's the long-term cost for the founders based on either you're building on the web or you're building on mobile?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the web is probably the cheapest and easiest to maintain, because it's basically the technology that you're developing these web apps or websites in is simpler than mobile apps. And then it increases there respectively and then hybrid and then native are more and more expensive. So I would say, especially for hybrid and mobile apps, the maintenance is a lot higher, because at times you need to update your app from a security point of view to update it to the latest version of the software that you built it in. And this means that often, just updating it, you need to update a whole lot of different libraries within your application, and there's often interdependencies. And then that basically takes a lot of time and effort and testing, and ultimately that costs. And then you've got the verification process as well, where, any new big updates, you've got to again motivate what the update is for. The app stores have got to verify it, and then they may reject it. And you've got to sort of iteratively work through that until they approve the mobile app.
And the other thing that plays into how where you build your business is the security around it all. Especially if you are collecting user data, which one is more secure and which one offers you a higher advantage of? If you are collecting user information, it will be more safe for the user themselves.
I would say that it depends on who or how the app is built, right? You can have an unsecure mobile app, you can have an unsecure web app, right? So I think it's about applying the best practices to both of those. But I would say that with a web app, users or web apps are more susceptible to hacking and to attacks, because of the sort of browser-based access which users access the website in, and hackers can go and look at the source code and kind of find vulnerabilities, or they can really create different attacks. Whereas a mobile app, you kind of like opening that app in a closed environment, and it's really, really sound and secure, and it's less susceptible to kind of external hacks, or they can't go and open up the mobile app and look at the code that it's built in, kind of as they can do on a web-based app. But a lot of the security happens actually outside of the web and mobile apps. Is often like on the back end, behind the scenes. There's also a lot of security that's put in place for both of those types of apps, which need to be in place irrespective of what they're built in on the front end.
And do you still feel like for most companies, there's still this thing within the startup scene that having a website offers you credibility and having an app is more like having a tool or having this toolkit that's just there and everyone can look at it. It's nice. But having a website gives you this sense of credibility, this status within the startup scene, or people just knowing, oh, I can go to your website. Is that still true within the startup scene? Or do you think that currently now it depends on the business?
I think it depends on the business. I think it comes back to what I said initially. If your application is solving a proper problem, right? So, basically people want to use your application because they've got a problem and your application solves that. It takes away their pain. So whatever that is, a website, yeah, it's great from a marketing point of view, but I think ultimately it's more about the concept. You could have the best mobile app. You can build the most beautiful, best functioning, fast mobile app. It does A, B, and C, but it's solving no problem. Like it's kind of, it's in a way useless, right? So the credibility or like it's not effective. Whereas you could have a web app, which is an MVP. Maybe it doesn't even look that good, but its functions and its features are really solving a problem. So even though it doesn't look as good and kind of doesn't give you a good impression, the outcome is that it's adding a lot more value to you as a user than a sort of this mobile app that kind of doesn't really solve any problems. And it's kind of there.
Yeah. And the other thing currently that's happening with AI becoming such a prominent thing within the applications and whatever we use nowadays, do you feel like this conversation of going either web or using mobile will still be a debate in the next 5 years? Or will there be something completely different that will have taken over this space in terms of like, oh, this is where you need to build your website, or this is the platform that you need to use to build your website?
I think we'd still be having this debate in a few years' time, to be honest.
Hmm.
Obviously, the technology would have changed, it would have improved. When I'm talking about technology, I'm talking about how we build these apps. So there will be improvements, but I still think there will be significant differences between the two platforms. I still think the browser will be very, very powerful. In fact, it will be much more powerful. Yeah. So if we, well, let me take a step back, right? If someone told me back in like the 2000s, or 2010 or something like that, that you'd be running all these massive applications in your web browser, because back in the day, people used to download and install programs or applications on their computers, like Microsoft Word, Excel spreadsheet, etc., etc. If you said to me that back then, like, wow, fast forward, everything is going to be running in your browser, I would
Yeah.
have thought like, wow, that's kind of, I don't think it's possible. The browsers are so slow, they're clunky, they buggy, they're not very powerful, they run out of memory. So browsers have come a long way in a long in actually not like that long a period of time. Like we're running everything in our browser, like in our business, we use Google Suite. So we can do maps, whatever, calendars, Gmail,
Mhm.
spreadsheets, Google Docs, whatever it is, presentations, all running in the browser. I think the browser is going to continue to become more and more powerful. Devices will become more and more powerful. But I do think that there is still something special about having a mobile app on your phone, which basically will, we spoke about it, that ease of clicking an icon on your home screen, just open that up straight away, not having to type in a browser. I think that is key. All browsers also get more and more access to device features. I think that may be a security risk. So I think there will still be a sort of a limitation in terms of what a browser can or cannot access. Whereas if your app needs certain device specific functionality, as we spoke about in the beginning of this talk, then you kind of have to go mobile app. Yeah, so I think it'll still be around. You may be talking also about other, platforms like the metaverse or whatever, but that's sort of like an third or option. But I think
Yeah.
the technology will move faster, but it will still be a relevant debate in a few years' time.
And let's say now I've built my app. How do you go about collecting that feedback once you've built that app on either of those devices and add features on your device after that?
So you can do a few things to get feedback. You can have functionality in the web-based app or in the mobile app that prompts the user to kind of give them feedback. Maybe you need to reward them. Maybe you need to monetize them a little bit, or you need to discount their subscription, or I don't know, give them some merch or something like that. I don't know. That's kind of up to the owner of the application, but they're, encouraging people through the app to give feedback. I don't think you'll get a lot of feedback. You can obviously run things like surveys. So if you've got your community or your user base, you've got thousands and thousands of users, maybe you send in them newsletters or even push notifications for that matter. We spoke about that. You could prompt users to kind of give you feedback, and that could sort of take them to a survey where you could ask a bunch of questions, open-ended, closed-ended questions. And then essentially, you may also want to reward them for giving you that feedback. And some users will reach out organically and just kind of say, oh, it would be great if you could do this or have this feature, like a multi-language or a multi-currency, or I don't know what it is, or product comparison feature. So they're kind of telling you what they need. They building your product, so to speak. And this is not something that we do, but you could probably even pay companies that focus on working with a bunch of users, and you could probably see who the best or the most engaged users are on your application from analytics, from data, from transacting. And you could potentially run workshops with them. And, again, you're probably going to need to pay them, but you could use that as a way to kind of really get feedback from the most engaged users for them to kind of tell you what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to get feedback. There's a book called Lean Startup, and there's actually quite a cool story in there. There was some application that this company wrote, and they had thousands of users, like tens of thousands of users. And then they couldn't ever figure out how to monetize this platform, right? And then they had no monetization. Then they put monetization in. So they had a sort of a free version, which everyone was using, and then they sort of had a premium version. And then they launched this thing. They did a lot of design and development, and they launched this this premium version within their sort of main app. And then no one was using this premium version. Like, they forecasted all this money coming in and all these users kind of upgrading. And they were like scratching their heads and wondering, like, geez, what's going on here? Like, why are there no users upgrading to the premium version? So they actually reached out to some of like their most important users. And I think they're like the biggest user they reached out to, and they said, we can see you using the app a lot. You're engaging. You obviously love it. You're transacting. But why are you not upgrading? Like, why are you not paying for like these extra features that we built? And they said to them, I didn't even know there's a premium version. And then essentially there was like some button on the home screen or somewhere. It was like, obviously it wasn't obvious, right? And they said, oh, I've never seen that button. Like, I go into app and I do this and this, but I've never seen that button. So they took that feedback, they got that feedback, and they just made some like simple UI UX changes, and then obviously built that into the app. And then they made this feature a bit more prominent based on the feedback that this like most engaged user gave them. And then the premium user subscribers skyrocketed. So I think it's important. That story kind of like tells you might think you know everything, but just speaking to your users, getting feedback, it's invaluable, and I think a lot of people don't do that enough. So I think that's quite a nice story to share with you and with the listeners.
And as we reach the final question, let's say I'm a founder, I am struggling with regards to where do I build my business? What's that first piece of advice that you give someone in terms of like when they come to you and they're like, hey, here's my startup idea, where do I build?
I would say we'll go for web. To be honest, it's simpler, it's quicker, it's cheaper. You can change quicker. You can get your products to market quicker. You can get feedback, and then you can kind of iterate quicker. Unless and I did touch on this earlier on, unless your app is expected to be a mobile app by your users. In other words, every competitor, like if you're launching a new bank and you're expecting and obviously, startups aren't going to launch a bank, but every bank's got a banking app. So if you come and say, listen, log into the mobile browser, you're probably not going to get much traction, right? So if the users demand to have a mobile app, it's either the mobile app or nothing, then you have to go mobile app. And then if your concept needs device specific features, you need to go mobile app as well. But for everything else, we always say go web first, really build an MVP, keep it simple, keep it light, get it to market, test it, see the product market fit, get some validation. And then after that, down the line, build a mobile app, when you really know that people want a mobile app, they're asking for, where's the mobile app? We want a mobile app. We have this right now. We've got a client built a big web platform for them. It's grown and grown and grown like for 4 years now. And the client's telling us, people are telling him, where's the mobile app? Asking him, when are you going to release your mobile app? And all of his competitors have got web and they've got mobile. So because he's got web, it's not that he's not able to compete, but now having the mobile app, he can compete with the other competition who've got mobile apps as well. So I would say that I think also if your in-app purchases, your monetization, your subscription, think about that platform tax, because that's also going to eat into your margin as well. So again, it's another sort of factor to stay away from mobile apps as a start.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's my advice. Go web and then really go mobile once you're ready for it.
And again, if people want to reach out to you, where do they kind of find you?
Yeah, you can check out our website, elemental.agency. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there. So I think those are the sort of two platforms where you can find me, and just reach out and connect. And yeah, always available to speak to people as well and answer questions. So yeah.
Yeah. So once again, thanks so much for being here. And that's all from us. And look forward to the next episode of From Garage to Growth.